Welcome to WIDA Webinars. This is a free virtual learning opportunity that offers educators insights and resources on a variety of topics relevant to educators of multilingual learners. In this webinar, you'll hear from WIDA's expert staff and researchers. If you want to be notified about upcoming WIDA webinars, sign up for our newsletters at wida.wisc.edu/news.
So today we are discussing strategies for supporting multilingual newcomers by me. And it is April Fool's Day, but this webinar is still happening. So thank you for being here. Let's begin by building a shared understanding of who we are referring to when we use the term newcomers. While certain defining characteristics vary by state and local policies, in the past, the U.S. Department of Education has collected data that generally classifies newcomers as being foreign-born and having recently arrived in the country within the previous 3 years. Newcomers play an important role in weaving our nation's cultural, social, and economic fabric, and U.S. schools play an important role in helping newcomers and their family develop a sense of learning and belonging in their new communities. It's important to acknowledge that newcomers constitute a highly diverse group of children and individuals across a range of cultural and linguistic identities and lived experiences. So newcomers can include students identified as SLIFE. Those are students with limited or interrupted formal education, as well as those arriving from American school abroad that are very familiar with the language. So while newcomer students do arrive with varying levels of English language proficiency, we are mainly focusing on our K-12 multilingual students with beginning English proficiency levels for the sake of our webinar and learning today. This is where we get the most amount of questions and the most amount of wonderings, seeking for resources and practices and approaches for these students. So while newcomers is not synonymous to a certain English proficiency level, today a lot of the targets are going to be towards those beginning proficiency levels. Over the past several years, multilingual newcomers have become the fastest growing demographic across the US school systems for the latest data that we have that still tracks, arriving in K-12 classrooms at increased rates in more and different locations from ever before. What that means is we're seeing multilingual newcomers in new and different settings. So while the highest concentration of multilingual newcomers and their families remains in historically traditional states and cities, the recent movement and trends includes a notable expansion outside of these traditional areas into more suburban and rural areas due to costs of living and job opportunities, and for various reasons. We are seeing newcomers in places we never really experienced them before and might not have those years of experience to lean on. As of 2021, which was the latest data available when I composed this webinar, data collected by the U.S. Department of Education noted about 30% of our foreign-born or immigrant children ages 5 to 7 are classified as newcomers, having been in the United States for 3 years or less. And you can see the top home languages of these recently arrived immigrant children here. That is the second bullet and then the sub-bullet underneath that. I would also particularly like to reaffirm the observation that newcomers are still a very heterogeneous group within themselves. This demographic makeup of this special population is also known for fluctuating in ways that mirror global, social, political, and environmental happenings. For instance, between the mid-2010s to early 2020s, we witnessed a significant increase in unaccompanied minors from Central America seeking to escape the targeting of this age group and gang violence tied to social and political unrest at the time there. Then from 2022 to 2024, we experienced an influx in refugees seeking asylum and resettling through private and public programs following the invasion of Ukraine. So you could see that the fluctuations reflect what's going on the global stage, and that helps us anticipate and understand some of the trends and statistics about our newcomers. Thank you for some of these questions that are coming in, and we're going to collect them and try to address as many as we can later. Thank you so much. Keep them coming. From the most current data available in the 2020 to 2021 school year, you can see that not all recent immigrants are considered multilingual learners or English learners, but about 3/4 or 70, almost 75% of them are. Looking at our K-12 classroom space, enrolled newcomers represent about 15% of our reported nationwide multilingual learner or English learner student populations. And continuing to wrap up this picture that we're kind of painting of what is going on with our multilingual learners, where are they going, and how can we anticipate them and their needs? Here is a really helpful map that you can view states. The states with the stars represent the highest number of total immigrant children. Orange states represent those who hold the greatest number of recently arrived immigrants of all ages. And blue states show the biggest share of immigrant children ages 5 through 17. These distinctive data points are important to acknowledge when discussing current trends and statistics around newcomers because, as you can see, they vary. Additionally, current trends in blue track the highest share of immigrant children newcomers to locations that did not historically boast large numbers and experiences with these students. These include states such as West Virginia, Alaska, and Idaho. Let's pause to root our thinking in the reason why we are here today, our students. The roles, locations, and perspective in our virtual webinar space represent a myriad of contexts. And I would love for you to share in the chat who are your multilingual learners that are shaping your perspective as you enter this space today. What languages do they speak? What cultures do they identify as? Where have they recently arrived from? What's going on in patterns in your place? So thank you. Continue to put this in the chat. Oh, this is amazing. Certain patterns, but you represent a lot of different students. This is incredible. As you put this in the chat, I hope that you're picturing your students and your teaching and learning setting in your head so that as we go forth, you can think about those students that motivated you to take your precious time to come here today and think about them and wonder about how we can help meet their needs and just work together to contribute to make a better space for them to enter inside our classrooms. So thank you for sharing that with me. But I hope that it helped you kind of put a hat on and some type of lens where you're thinking about those students that motivated you to come here today because they appreciate you and you're already doing so much for them by devoting your time and your thought space. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And keep them in mind as we travel through the rest of our material together. Now that we have a good sense of who and our as in this space, newcomer multilingual learners and their families are that might be arriving at our school buildings, let's think about how we can best welcome them into their new learning community. We know that from the first moment we interact with these students and their families, it sends a message. So we want that message to be clear. We want them to feel welcomed, valued, and ignite their passion for learning in our classrooms and our building setting. And that starts, as I said, the second that they walk through that door. We know that students and families feel comfortable and safe in their new setting. That needs to be a prerequisite to academic learning. So let's start discussing with how we can create or maintain intentional spaces within our school communities that keep them in mind, that they feel ready to navigate them with you. Some top considerations include signage. So, signs are really critical for navigating new spaces and accessing essential resources, such as bathrooms, exits, and offices of trusted adults. So, we want to make sure that newcomers and their families know how to find those things. So, things that you can do are a simple walkthrough. Take a walk through your building and reflect. Where are our signs located? Are they visible? Are they comprehensible for those that might not be familiar? Is there visual support for those signs? Do they need additional images or translations to be properly communicated? And just kind of identifying these touch points can be really helpful. Collecting background information. We really want you to know your students, their personal stories, and how they identify culturally and linguistically, instead of assuming some of these things. So it's essential to best understand and address their needs and aspirations by knowing who they are, what they know, what they're coming with, and where we can meet them. A great place to start is an example getting to know our newcomers questionnaire that I shared with you in your webinar packet. So you are also going to have an exclusive look at some tools that we built into a newcomer self-paced course, as well as some original materials that we put together for you in your packet. So one of those is an example questionnaire that can really help us um, gather some essential information from understanding their assets and what they're entering our buildings with, as well as some resources that we might be able to come up with to meet their needs. Thank you, Michelle, for that question. Molly put in the chat, thank you so much, Molly, the participant handout. So there's going to be a PDF that you can access, and it is fillable for you, which is a huge bonus. Yeah, thank you for asking. Accessibility to communication. Newcomers and their families have the right to access the opportunity and understanding of school policies and procedures, extracurricular events, and engagement in classroom learning. Think about what efforts are made to ensure that communication with these families regarding this information is delivered to, accessed, and comprehended by this specific population. Even if it's something like a daily homework task, or if it's something like the opportunity to participate in a soccer club after school or go on a field trip. Are we communicating with families? Are we making sure that they understand these opportunities as well? All right. And resources. While newcomers and their families arrive at schools with an abundance of unique assets, they can also often benefit from the support of services and resources as well. Have the right people within your school system checked in to see if they could benefit from being connected to organizations in the community, providing food, shelter, clothing, healthcare, and or mental or social services. And have these opportunities been communicated in a comprehensible language and manner? Yes, so these handouts, as well as the recording of this, will be uploaded into the WIDA website in a few weeks. So you will be able to access those there. And please don't scramble, because we want you to spend this time engaging with us and listening. So don't stress about that. And lastly, professional learning opportunities for staff. The circumstances, strengths, and needs of multilingual newcomers and their families are often unique. Has training been provided for our staff involved with welcoming and serving these populations? And when we say staff, we really mean all staff. So this includes front office staff, school counselors, administrators, librarians, cafeteria workers, elective teachers, and more. Anyone that touches these students' lives deserves to feel prepared and confident themselves in working with these students, supporting them, uplifting them, and meeting their needs. And so we want everyone to be able to be engaged in this discussion and not just the ESL staff because they are all of our students and they look to all of us to guide them through their days. I love hearing what's going on in these different settings. Thank you. When establishing enrollment systems, policies, and practices with our multilingual newcomers and their families in mind, expectations surrounding school related processes should be explicitly defined and communicated. That help keeps us accountable. And then it also kind of is a reassurance that we're meeting our needs in time in case any of that is checked on. And so, familiarizing students and their families with these procedures before they even start their classroom learning will help increase their comfort with their new setting, their comfort with routines and expectations throughout their day, equip them with tools to succeed socially and academically, and ensure their access and opportunities to participate in their new communities. So it's essential to assign personnel in your school community responsible for firstly communicating and then secondly enacting such processes to share responsibility for these students across our learning spaces. So we make sure that nothing goes unchecked. We make sure that students know what is expected of them, and then they can predictably navigate through their day and not worry about the little things that are rolled up into local school building policies and procedures that might be new to them. And they can just focus on their learning and making themselves feel a sense of belongingness in their community and starting to grasp their new language and their new content and not worry about these things. Here we can see just a very small snippet of procedural elements that are important to consider. So here we only gave 3 examples. School bus procedures and expectations, physical exams and state immunization requirements, and uniform and dress code guidelines. A fuller but still non-exhaustive list we compiled and is able to explore for you in the table entitled Important Procedures for Newcomers and Their Families in your webinar packet. So we gathered that for you. Other significantly important topics include cafeteria procedures and dietary expectations, discipline policies, emergency drills, attendance, and grading policies. I see questions. The packet, Molly is doing a great job and continuously popping that in the chat. So just scroll up a little bit in the chat and she'll continue to pop that in for you there. Take a moment to check out the resource that we gathered for you from some of my research and my team that we collected in the newcomers course and reflect on your setting while you skim through pages 11 through 16 in your packet. And anything that's sticking out for you, you're welcome to reflect on and pop in the chat. But what I see, what I encourage you to do here is seek affirmation. Are you and your school systems already doing some of these and you feel really good about it, that you've had some successes with? Or also look at it through the lens of goal setting. Where can we go next? I know we do a great job on this, but I really think that we can make some improvement here. Or are there some surprises like, oh, I totally overlooked this one specific aspect and how that might impact them? Um, Molly, our moderator, has been dropping that packet into the chat and she will continue to kind of do so, but just scroll up. I know we're getting flooded. This is amazing, the turnout, but I know that that can drown some things in the chat. Um, Anastasia, I do think that that's an important question for me to kind of take a second on here. So, how do you recommend these procedures communicated with newcomer families? So that is up for you to figure out what works in your setting, and even just naming someone or some system that you can use is a huge step. So, depending on resources available to you, that can be a translator, a translation service. That can be someone who's an expert in that area. I know in my last school, school counselors were the ones that were in charge of programming and placement. So they were the experts. They weren't the ESL teacher. The ESL could help them connect them to the local translation services available to them, or could join them in that meeting and share, form, and foster that connection and kind of build a we need a cross curricular team because everyone is an expert in certain areas in that school. So that might be that point person that can answer those questions. And then it's up to you all as a system to kind of build a community of support around that. That includes the families and that includes all the necessary people to touch base. So maybe that's you have a task force and all you just name all those people that might be needed for some of these procedures. And that small group, that small team comes up with the plan at the beginning of the year, and uses the resources available to them in order to make a system that works. And that kind of goes, that question and that answer helps translate to our next slide. No, thank you, Anastasia. You helped my transition. So I want you to take a moment to consider the right two columns in the table that you just examined and the discussion that we just kind of pivoted to in terms of responsibility. This work cannot just be on you. You showed up here, which is an amazing first step. You are claiming that you are want to learn more about your students and how to serve them as best as you can. But you can't then just turn around and be the only person working on this. You need everyone. And so we know that students feeling welcomed in their safe and new learning environments is a prerequisite to academic learning. So they can't just feel safe with one person or in one classroom. So once we establish this, students are ready to be vulnerable enough to lower their affective filter and start playing more with language and grade level subject area learning, to start making friends, to start integrating themselves in your community. So you want them to feel that way in every classroom and in every hallway and in every space throughout your building. So achieving this sense of belongingness from our newcomers is deeply rooted in shifting from the left, the 20th century paradigm, to the right, the 21st century paradigm. And that's intentional and meaningful collaboration among our educators. Across our school systems, every educator working in service of our newcomers is essential in leveraging their knowledge and expertise in their respective fields. It's also responsible for making them feel welcome in the procedure table, as we saw, in the cafeteria, on the school bus. We all need to be trained and in conjunction with our messaging and our approach and our confidence in working with these students so that they can navigate the school spaces safely. Great. Now that we have a good sense of who our newcomer multilingual learners and their families are, how can we best welcome them into their new learning community? I saw some conversations going on in the chat with some of your favorite resources or things that you have had successes with, and I'd love to hear about some more. And so, not only considering what are you doing well, but also goals for improving these approaches. Where would you like to go next and why? I also see compliments for the visual. That is from WIDA's Focus Bulletin on Collaboration. So you can look that up, or we might be able to snag those links for you at the end. But thank you for acknowledging that. And thanks, Jenny, for getting us started. Student ambassadors. I love that. Information packets, welcome centers. Excellent. Translators, a lot of times that's on you, right? Or the translation services that you are able to coordinate. Yep, a lot of times we're coming from different districts where certain resources may or may not be available, and also certain incidences, like certain districts will have lower incidences of newcomers, and so that might create a different situation for how you're going to approach this versus those that have high incidence situations. So I want to acknowledge that. I love that a lot of you assume so much responsibility because it is evident how much you care. I can tell by the way that you're talking about greeting them and meeting them. Education nights, welcoming families into that space, advisory periods. I love these. Please crowdsource because you all are each other's greatest resources as well. And when I go and facilitate around the country, I take some of your best and brightest ideas and put them in my bucket, and they help other educators around the country because then I pull from that and say, hey, someone recommended this. Might that work in your setting? And the difficult thing about our work is that there is no one size fits all because we're all teaching and learning in very different contexts. And so you just kind of have to try out what the resources you have available to you, what might be best. And it's okay if it doesn't all work. But that's why it's so helpful for these opportunities to connect with others and springboard different ideas and approaches. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't even keep up with these messages in a good way. Please take time to try to catch up with others as we continue to move through. Now that we have welcomed our newcomers and their families into their school communities on a macro level, let's zoom in on how we can best support them and their social and academic learning in the classroom. The 5 ELD standard statements represent the language of schooling and provide the broadest conceptual framing of content and language integration. And what I mean by that is if you look at standards 2 through 5, super simple, but super important to name. Are we using the language for language arts? Are we using the language for mathematics, the language for science, or the language for social studies? That might seem obvious, but it is an important step to name for ourselves and for our students. An example that I like to give is when I was giving a workshop in person in a state, there was a pre-algebra math teacher there. And she said that she really liked acknowledging this level of naming the ELD standard because she, that past week, was using the word constant in her math class. And she was using constant in reference to a constant variable within an equation. And using the word constant in that situation, referring to a constant variable in algebra, was very different than the way that students would think about or use the word constant in a different classroom. And so, even though that might be so natural for us at this point in our understanding of language, it's not always natural for students. And so acknowledging we are in this class or we're going to dive into this subject, and therefore we are using the language of math in this class right now. And that's the bucket that I want you to fill. I want you to fill your math language bucket. so that you have tools and words and phrases that you can use and you know that you can refer to when we're using the language of math. And so that's what acknowledging that does. But I also want to point out, as the graphic above shows, that ELD Standard 1 in blue, it underscores all the other content-based ELD standard statements. Sometimes we get so wrapped up in preparing our students for academic and content-based language instruction that we forget that we should also always be including supports for the language of social and instructional purposes as well. No matter what grade level or content area classroom newcomers might be in, we should be incorporating scaffolds around the language necessary for them to engage in meaningful learning and participate in authentic classroom discourse and activities. This means planning and preparing practice, models, and supports surrounding language needed to communicate in the social context of the lesson, like engaging in discussions with peers and teachers, and to comprehend language and lesson instruction. For example, in my last position as a middle school ESL specialist, I was receiving feedback from my content teachers that my students were not completing their assignments. So I asked them, what's going on? I conducted a very non-scientific but wildly informative Google poll. And I found out that the vast majority of my students understood what to do for the beginning portion of the classroom lessons when they were expected to watch the teacher, absorb the information, take notes along with others. However, when the tables turned and it became time for students to engage in groups or complete work individually, they were getting lost in the language of the instruction, such as, now go do a turn and talk, or complete a quick write in response to the essential question. No one prepared them to dissect those directions. I received a lot of wonderings from educators around the consortium on what supports for this type of language. How can I help my students understand the instructions and the directions in my classroom and not just the content? And so some of their bright ideas were things like, if you use the same strategies or terms over and over, like talk partners or turn and talks or quick writes or interactive journal, is to make an anchor chart with visuals for what these terms look like and what definitions they have, and maybe translate those keywords into a few different prominent languages on that anchor chart. Another way is to practice and model these student actions and behaviors with your full class. If these are words you're going to be using, everybody can benefit from practicing a turn and talk. What does that look like? What does that feel like? What does that sound like? And if you practice it a few times, everyone gets comfortable with those actions. And another strategy to make sure students comprehend a task is things like including individual, small group, or full class checks for understanding at natural checkpoints in the lesson. Something as simple as a thumbs up, thumbs down, or thumbs in the middle. Are we okay? Do we understand that next step? And when students get comfortable enough, they'll tell you when they don't. And then you know who to check into or where to go. You also may be familiar with some or all of these practices, but here is just a short list of some approaches on classroom delivery and instruction that have been found to improve the social and academic learning and performance of newcomers. Things like structured teaching protocols encourage educators to set and uphold predictable and dynamic classroom actions and routines for their learners. For newcomers, research suggests that this predictability allows students to calm because they learn expected actions and behaviors quickly, which lowers their levels of stress and their affective filters and allows them to engage more authentically in the classroom learning because they're more comfortable and confident that they know what's coming next and what is expected of them. Translanguaging is a nuanced bi or multilingual practice. As an educator, you can foster a classroom community that encourages students' use of their full linguistic skill set to create connections between their languages. And that deepens their understanding because often they have an understanding, a deeper understanding, and a greater nuanced set of knowledge if they're able to bring and welcome their native and home languages into that classroom as well. And they'll make connections like, oh, wait, that's that in English. That sounds like this in my language, or it reminds me of that. And these connections help foster greater grade level understanding. In this way, they're able to deepen their knowledge and understanding through strengthening their linguistic networks and extending their repertoires across content learning. A theme-based approach or thematic instruction to unit and assessment design centers whatever grade level and subject area material you are teaching around a strong and explicit theme. This theme should be emphasized as a big picture learning to students and have reinforced connections throughout a language in the curricula, text, activities, discussion, and assessment. For newcomers, research suggests that the more students participate in diverse engagements and different activities around a singular underlying theme, the clearer their understanding of ideas and relationships around those ideas will become. And lastly, project-based learning is a teaching method which centers student learning around an engaging question, problem, or challenge over an extended period. This method allows for integration of content and language, as well as flexibility in how students present their findings. This could be building a model, delivering a presentation, recording a podcast, and acting out their learning or writing a poem. Those are just some ideas of how you can be really flexible, but allow students to really dig deep and show what they know and not be limited by a specific structure of one particular assignment and only one way to assess their learning before drawing conclusions. All right. Earlier, we discussed the shift to shared responsibility to all educators working together for all students in that 21st century paradigm of teaching. Here, I would like you to introduce you to two educators who share their successful experiences of collaborating for language and content learning for newcomers across their very different settings. So if you're thinking, okay, I'm bought in, I care about this, but I need to uh, pass that buy-in in. I need to grow buy-in in my community. How can I do this? These are two very different approaches from two very different teachers in different settings. First, you're going to start with a video from Marina Hadeen. She is an English learner teacher for elementary and middle school and a 2023 WIDA fellow from Woodhaven, Michigan. And then you're going to hear from Anne Marchant, who is a K-12 ESL program director, and she teaches in a really cool setting. She teaches in a virtual network of rural schools across Wisconsin, and how these rural schools with low incidence situations of newcomers and multilingual learners kind of came together to build this network and collaborate and support one another. So you're going to hear their approaches and it's going to take you about 7 minutes to watch both of their videos. And Molly just put them in the chat for you. So we're going to pause on moving forward for the next 7 minutes as you view those videos and reflect on them. These two educators, I learned a lot from their different approaches to the different setting, because when you go through the studies and the research, it's unsatisfying when a lot of the answers are it depends, right? And a lot of how we serve students that are different and your teaching and learning contexts that are different depends. It depends on what resources are available to you. It depends on who your students are, how many of them are newcomers, where they're coming from, what they speak, and all of that determines how you're able to consolidate researches and approaches. But learning from each other's stories helps. Every time I hear another story, it helps paint a more holistic and colorful pictures of ways that we can welcome them and we can really meet their needs and value their resources in our classrooms. So let's keep charging on. Now that we've established our community-based approach to teaching newcomers in our school buildings, let's discuss how we can prepare to address how sometimes their unique lived experiences might bring emotions and reactions that surface in the classroom. According to the National Child Traumatic Stress Initiative, by the age of 16, approximately 2 in 3 children nationwide will experience at least one traumatic event. Research indicates responses to such trauma, in turn, are found to significantly interfere with a student's academic learning and social behaviors. Trauma can be experienced by any student, but for those who are also learning English as an additional language or who are adjusting to a new culture, these experiences add another dimension of care that need to be addressed by educators. One important subgroup of the newcomer multilingual population is students identified as SLIFE. I've seen some of you bring those students up in the chat. And that acronym stands for Students with Limited or Interrupted Formal Education. Generally, states define this term as missing 2 or more consecutive years of academic learning in the past. There are many reasons why SLIFE students have experienced these attendance gaps, including political instability, violence and war, lack of transportation and access in rural areas, or cultural, religious, or financial restrictions. It is important to know if your student is not just a newcomer, but if they qualify as SLIFE as well, and why. While it is extremely important to note that not all students identified as SLIFE have experienced trauma, it is a subgroup of students disproportionately affected by traumatic experiences along their individual journeys. As we are well aware, trauma is often also experienced by students unrelated to their immigration journey. So these practices can just benefit everyone in a classroom to mitigate triggers that might arise during the school day. The above is an image of suggested classroom level practices from a WIDA focus bulletin I co-authored with some amazing educators and another professional learning specialist. And it focuses on trauma-informed considerations and strategies for our multilingual learners. Take a moment to read and reflect. We will share that resource at the end of the webinar if you would like to learn more about how trauma can uniquely impact our multilingual learners, how it can manifest inside our classrooms, and how we can mitigate its effects with collaborative resourcing and restorative conversations. And we're happy to continue this conversation and further learning there. But it is important to note at this point in our webinar as well. Thank you for taking a moment to take that in. And let's dive a little bit deeper into this topic since it is one that we get a lot of questions about because it is a very important and not always clear or intuitive how to proceed with trauma-informed practices at the classroom level. So I would like for you to meet our educator expert, Nathaniel Jacobson. He works as a high school exceptional education teacher at a special day school for students in Nashville, Tennessee. And these students are enrolled there after struggling in traditional learning environments. And his experience primarily is working with students dual identified as multilingual learners and special education with emotional disturbance. Here, he shares his top 8 tips and tricks for educators attempting to embed trauma-informed approaches into their teaching and learning context. So I would love for you to take the next few minutes to watch Nathaniel's video on his top tips and tricks. I learned a ton from working with him. And on page 17 of your webinar packet, you have space to take notes on any of these that resonate with you or stick out or seem really applicable. So we're going to take 7 minutes to Check out that video and that handout. Molly, thank you so much, has been dropping links to those in the chat. And let's learn from our expert educator. Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much for sharing your reflections as well as your favorite resources, which ties very much into this last touch point before we are going to play a bit of an interactive game. So, the ideas that we have talked about to welcome, uplift, and include our newcomers in our personal learning communities are by no means exhaustive. You representing so many different roles, personal experiences of your own lives, as well as teaching and learning settings, are one another's greatest resources. And we have over 600, we fluctuated between like 600 and 700 people in here. So you are each other's greatest resources. You represent so many different students and you represent yourselves. So feel free to crowdsource some of your favorite ways to advocate for and elevate learning, belongingness, and the unique strengths and needs of our newcomers. Here are some of my favorite tools that I have heard from all of you while facilitating with educators around the country. I put them here and feel free to share, continue to share yours as well. You have done a phenomenal job doing that already. And I did see some questions on here too of like, how do we approach this? How do we get that buy-in that we need? How do we disseminate the information that we're learning today and continue to move forward and not stagnate our work for our multilingual newcomers? So some amazing ideas that I have collected from all of you include, yes, I hear a shout out to the bathroom briefs. um, Bathroom or hallway infographic. I had a teacher who said, I can trap people in the bathroom. They're going to read what I put on the back of those stalls. So let me start using that to my benefit and for my students' benefit and advocacy. Weekly or monthly newsletters or emails, reserve time at school or district-wide PDs, getting support from your admin by allowing you to share what you learned today or some resources that you've been working with that you have found successful for these students. Professional learning communities around a book or a course. Some questions about like administrative buy-in. Show them the data, begin a professional learning community, and start working through this all together. Those guiding questions. What could that look like for you? What does the research really say for these students? Who's walking through your doors, parsing through that, and then tailoring some ideas and allowing time and space for like a think tank to create a plan. Summer stipends. I've also heard great success with offering summer stipends to align content curriculum, grade level, and content areas with the WIDA ELD standards framework. So you could work on this together. You can also look up certain states have already done this. So you can also look if your state has done this or if this is something that you can pitch. Because this work is important. And when we work together for content and language learning, it becomes easier on all of us, including the students and the other educators in our building and ourselves. We only have 10 more minutes left today. So we're going to, if you will indulge me, process all the information we have covered. Thank you for sticking with me on our learning journey so far. And we have a bit of a fun little interaction we're going to try out. And it is going to be an opportunity to both synthesize and expand on some of the research-backed approaches that we've discussed centering our newcomers' learning. And we're going to cover some of the top do's and don'ts while teaching with multilingual newcomers in our content classrooms. In the following slides, you will be presented with 8 forthcoming students one by one. Statements, I'm sorry. 8 forthcoming statements. And after you read a statement, decide if you believe this is a do or a don't, and respond by either typing out those words or giving a thumbs up or thumbs down in the chat. All right, so we're going to practice with our first one. Ready? Provide multimodal models such as images, videos, diagrams, audios, manipulatives, and support and delivery of content. Yes, thank you for flooding the chat. We're starting pretty unanimously. This is a do. Integrating multiple forms of representation increases access points, connections, and opportunities for multilingual learners to reinforce grade level content learning. Sometimes that single visual, auditory gesture or model is the missing link to build that connection. I've had a student that was like sitting there so confused, and I finally added a visual, and they're like, oh, and that was the difference. That was the bridge that they needed. Awesome. Okay. Speak quickly and pointedly, only giving directions once. This is so fun. We're piloting this kind of do and don'ts. I haven't done it with this big of a crowd, but this is great to see these the chat flood with some consensus. Excellent. This is a don't. Instead, speech that is slow, enunciated, and supported by gestures and visuals and repeated more than once is more easily understood. Offer directions in short, simple sentences using familiar words and phrases. Yeah, okay. I like this group's vibe. Thank you for leaning into this. This is a do. The delivery of instructions in this manner is more digestible for our multilingual newcomers. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let students choose a new, independently determined routine each day. Good. I hesitated because I was going to give you a warning to read carefully, but you are ahead of me. Y'all are great. You're picking up on what I was hoping you would anyway. Yeah, this is a don't. Highly structured environments, like we talked about, the highly structured protocols. Highly structured environments and activities are important for our newcomers to establish familiarity and routine to become a more active participant in their classroom community. So additionally, predictability is really comfortable for students entering a new environment. So we don't want that routine to be new and change each day. We want that to be highly structured and predictable to increase their comfort level. Okay, read this carefully because the double negative confuses some people. Avoid social emotional connection, check-ins, I'm sorry, in case they trigger traumatic experiences. You guys are too good. Even with the double negative, it didn't trip you up. This is a don't because we do not want to avoid social emotional check-in because getting to know our students' emotions and experiences and stories help us understand what's impacting them and makes them who they are, what they are going through, and all they're bringing to the classroom. So, social emotional check ins can be as simple as a written or oral routine where students each day share or draw an emoji to represent how they're feeling that day and why. Or it could be a more responsive, in the moment, one on one conversation or restorative conversation based on observed behaviors. Sometimes students reveal serious emotions impacting their lives. You might not be the best person to fully address those emotions and flesh them out, but you are the best person to fully recognize and notice that your students are going through something and not to ignore that. So you are the best person to connect with them. If you notice that they're struggling or something's going on, you are their person today and you are doing a great thing by just checking in. And then you can connect them to the right resources or people and point people in your building that can help address those better. And SEL check-ins are also shown to establish strong relationships and safe classroom communities that in turn increase academic success as well. We're almost done. Promote lesson participation by providing students prompts, restating ideas, referring to supports, and responding with encouragement. Affirmative. I like the creative liberties we're getting in some of these responses too. Absolutely. This is a do. These teacher actions enable more senses of material and personal support, forming of connections and opportunities to engage and reinforce their learning. Pay attention to reflection, including teacher and student interactions and student interactions, as well as lesson materials and classroom decor. Yeah, I like the emojis coming in here. And this is a great crowd. And you all seem to be here in the same mindset. So thank you. This is definitely a do. We all know that actions speak louder than words, and students pick up on underlying messages of mannerisms in their daily interactions with teachers and peers. So let's make sure that these interactions are patient, welcoming, and encouraging. Additionally, it's important to intentionally use classroom decor and learning materials that reflect the cultural and linguistic identities represented in our classroom, so students see themselves when they are attempting to connect to their learning. Yes, thank you for all of this. I believe this is our last one. Solely encourage the use of English in the classroom to quicken English language development. Nope, I like that. Yeah, definitely. This is a don't. We want to invite home languages and encourage the act of translanguaging or allowing students to bring their full linguistic repertoire. English only zones should be things of the past. That doesn't help them learn and it doesn't help us. Big mistake. Oh, thank you for those that are being really personally reflective. Sometimes policies or approaches are made with the best of intentions to set our students up for success. But it's okay to make mistakes as long as we learn from them and we're transparent with the kids throughout. Big differences will be made if you invite them to bring what they know and make connections to what they already know and languages that they already use, because that will quicken their language development so much faster. And it uplifts their existing background knowledge and lived experiences and kind of invites greater participation and sense making. Amazing. So we have just about 2 minutes left. Thank you so much for engaging in that interactive learning experience with me, as well as being such great listeners, leaning into this content, sharing your ideas, connecting with one another. That's exactly what this space is for. The recording will be on the WIDA website in the coming weeks. So I also have a social media page at the end. If you follow us, you will see where you can kind of access and where these WIDA webinars are housed, and the recording and the handout will be located there soon. I loved hearing from how everyone is processing their shared learning today. So if you take a moment to reflect on one of these are some great prompts that we can leave with some self-reflection. And if you noticed, I put some strategies in there, some sentence stems. And we also will be popping into the chat some further learning with WIDA resources. Those are here. And these will all be on our website. And then also some sources and more resources that we use to reference some data throughout this webinar. We are so grateful for you to take your precious time today to spend with us, because I know that your time is valuable and you coming here is a huge step in the right direction to serving your students. So thank you for being you and forefronting them. Here is a QR code for you to give us some feedback on the WIDA webinar today. And please check out our modes of communication and socials to join us for further opportunities. And thank you all so much. This was such a great crowd.